So you'll start to accumulate friends that come to your home or you feel personal connections with, and it becomes more personal and sympathetic with the moon there. But if it's negative, you start accumulating not the sympathetic, you start getting the negative of it, and you start remembering the memory of the friendship that wasn't there anymore. Why did someone leave? How come we were such a good team? You know, at high school, we played the best baseball team, but then after that, the teams were never as good. Or for someone else, they might have been really good. But the need to collect, the moon collects feelings, collects memories, good and bad, based on the security of the moment of the situation you're in. So for the moon being in the 11th house, based on the friends and the people you know, you collect your sense, you develop your sense of security and memory around it. So I've lived in many countries. I've traveled a lot. I've been in a lot of places. I have friends in many places. So I could go to most cities and find a few friends. But because my friends are all spread out, I don't necessarily have friends in the next door in the neighborhood. But I do a lot of thinking about my friends or who's there, and my feelings go into that. I collect memories around. I have all these pockets of reality, of memories of different friends in different places. Now everybody has this quadrant. Everyone has this nature, but because my moon's there, it's something I need to work through or that I take personally. So having a friend that I'm close to and feeling close to, then if the friend lets me down or walks away and it's how could you be, it's unsympathetic, it really affects my behavior. I'm really challenged to the core, made insecure instead of secure. Then I start worrying about it. Whew. So then the moon affects how you think with your Mercury, how you value. All these things build up the whole package of your chart. But this is the basic, and we grow out of it. We can rise above our moon, but we still have to live properly. So you're seeing the challenge involved in where the moon is. When the moon's in the 8th house, this is the house of shared resources. If you're together with someone, who dies first? Who gets the house? Who gets the inheritance? Who's responsible for the kids? Who has to pay for things? Do we share what we're paying? So it's about sharing, about trusting, even about death and exchanges. It's considered the house of death. But death and inheritances. If someone dies, who gets what? You know, and who reacts to what? So these are all the need to feel socially secure, having memory of who's trustworthy, who's not. How did I let someone who wasn't trustworthy get close? Or how did I get close to someone and then they were really trustworthy or not? All of these things, this social conscience builds up from having social conscience, having people, sharing resources with other people, and having the energies together. If we put our energies together, we have half the expenses to pay the one rent. You know, if we've got these 3 kids, we can put our energies together and figure out what we can do and how much we can use to take care of their education or their play or whatever. So this is the sensation of being sensitive to what's needed between others. And the moon is going to be really, the family needs this, we need this for the home, for the family, we need a house, we got to move in we're going to need the house, who's paying for it? Like that. But it can also at times be psychological battles over people who, suppose you have the family, but suppose someone has an addiction or something, or your partner is an alcoholic and you're fighting for how the energies of togetherness are used, and it's challenging the trust. It can create deep psychological complexes that go into your memories that create negative patterns. And the work is to start fighting that and build up personal patterns for yourself. But if you have your moon there, you don't feel like doing it for yourself. You do it for the other person or to belong to the other person. If you have it in the 2nd house, you'll do it for yourself, but you won't be able to do it so much for the other person. So it's funny, you put the moon into the houses, it's affecting the houses, but the houses are kind of working with the moon to present this energy. And there's all these different layers, gross to higher, that you can express it at. You're still going to accumulate the memories and the feelings around it. It's so important. You got an autistic kid, you're trying to solve therapy without knowing the stuff about the moon or without knowing the horoscope is guesswork at best. You know, so, okay. So when you have the moon is in a feeling quadrant, so like I'm going over theory and trying to make some examples of it. You've done the worksheets and you've seen how it happened for you, and it stretches something. Oh, that's connected here, or that was, and as soon as you see one pattern, you see, oh, there's one thing. You'll start very quickly or shortly after, you'll see 5 or 10 or maybe 20 other ways that the moon works in that place based on how it worked for you. which is the importance of doing these worksheets. So having these worksheets done are part of your exams. It's the main part of your exams, but you're not being marked as much for what you say, as more for that you're making a connection between your experience and the category. And once you make that exception and you have that naturally in you and you can do it for yourself, you'll be able to talk to anybody else about their chart. Not a problem. Okay, so when the moon is in the 5th house, that's the house of play, of kids, of performance, of romance, of personal creativity, but of your performance. But just because the moon's there, you might have a need to be performing, you might have a need to have kids, but there can be many fluctuating situations around whose kids, what kids, how many kids, how stable are the kids. There can be many issues about kids and being a kid and growing up, being supported and not supported, that are affecting your feelings. And you'll accumulate them. And then what do you do with them? It's power to create with, but when it's negative, it's almost a justification to why bother. But each one of these succeeding houses, the feelings will accumulate in the feeling section, the sensations, the interactions will accumulate, the friendships will accumulate, the resources will accumulate in the intuitive quadrant. You'll see each of these as accumulating, but it's trying to accumulate the changeable moon. So there's a need to accumulate, there's a need to collect things, but it's always changing. There's always going to be worry about being secure around these things. So this is just the lunacy of the moon. The point here is, as we're doing these things, we're understanding the planet more and more subtly. In the signs, we're seeing those categories, in the houses, we're seeing another, and we're starting to see the nature of how the moon functions. And it starts expanding our awareness of the moon and how many different ways it can happen. Okay, in the cadent houses, these are the understanding or transforming houses. So we can see you have your own being, you're identifying to being something, being yourself, being a career, being married, being at home. Then you have resources because you're being yourself. You're being with a friend, you're being in a career. You have friends. You're being in a partnership. You have mutual resources. You're being secure, and because you're being secure, you can have hobbies and things you can play with. So these are basic. That's the basic way that books read to interpret it. They go around that way. But I see it more that you're motivated, the I see, and based on your motivation and where you're coming from, you have a certain understanding where I'm coming from. I had a bad night's sleep. I had a difficult, well, I'm not sure what I want to do, or I got to go to school, don't feel like going to school. I got to get it. You can be overly tired, drunk from the night before, hangover, and that's going to affect your understanding and your ability to express yourself when you first wake up. That ability to express yourself will determine how you're going to use the things around you, which, as you're expressing yourself and you're figuring out how to use the things you have around you, it develops and crystallizes into your identity, into your being. And from there, you project that out. Okay, so the 3rd house is the understanding house, the adaptable house, trying to find different ways. So you have the moon in the 3rd house, you're always trying to understand your feelings, your need for security, which is secure, which isn't, and you're trying to interpret or figure it out. And it's an intuitive relationship, but your common sense is tied to it. So someone could always be talking about family matters, always remembering the family things that are personal things, or could always be talking about their home and what they're coming from. It's not going to be so inclined to be talking about career things. So they could be very funny, or they could be almost seemingly neurotic or insecure. It would depend on the education they have. If they grew up in a really negative early environment with prejudice and different things, they're going to pick up those ideas. And every day you're going to go through this, and the moon is going to be trying to create habits, study habits, learning habits, communication habits. And it's really about how you need to express yourself, and understanding how to express yourself better, more than how other people want to hear you or how you act to other people. This is the 3rd house. This is intuitively expressing where you're coming from. We can do this impaired, we can do this positive, and we're going to collect all the different ways to that. So the moon's collecting those memories This happened before. Why should I do this now? I need to express myself, but I was always going this way. Or, like, I like the expression. What's a little joke? One guy saying to there, why is it every time I ask you a question, you answer with another question? And the guy says, do I do that? So that's like a third house puzzle. Like, it's not rational out there. It's just a personal, subjective, intuitive thing. But in that process, there's a need to understand and to develop, understand your feelings, understand where you're coming from, understand your motives, understanding how you came out of the home you came from. There's a need to grow to make it positive rather than negative, because your memories will be affected by that, and your sense of security will be attached to that. But it's not a restricted thing. It's not like having things or being things. This is trying to figure things out. There's a need to figure things out, or a need to intuitively act on your understanding of how it works, even when it's wrong. Oops. Okay. So when the moon's in the 12th house, that's the next cadent house. That's the house of transforming, understanding and transforming. The 3rd and 9th are understanding. 12th and 6th are transforming, adjusting. So you're putting your energy out at the ascendant. You're projecting your image. Hi, I'm here. And then you're having to transform the image. So what? Or like you walk into a room and you walk into a classroom, there's 3 seats that are empty. You have to look around and decide where you're going to sit. You're going to have to look around. You walk in and you don't fit in, but you have to see where you're going to anchor or where you might fit in. So that first perception of walking into the unknown, that's the 12th house. So with your moon there's a tendency to project your feelings out in places where other people may or may not be sensitive to them. So one often feels isolated, or that one doesn't belong, and tends to not project the feelings. I better not, because someone might not like it. That's a feeling. That's thinking about one's feelings and trying to think, I better not say this. But then the feelings get locked up, and one eventually has to find places where you can project for good things, where people can think okay and you'll be accepted. So those needs are there, but the memories are going to be about all the times, mostly going to be about the times where it never happened, or the one time when it did, when it worked well, or when someone hurt you or put your feelings out and you went into this group and somebody made fun of you in front of everybody. It's going to bother you. So there's a need to transform your life, or to live differently than necessarily the way you were brought up. And you're trying to see which way is going to work, which way is not. But in the process, there's often a need to transform and understand one's bad habits socially, how one's affecting others. And you may not feel like it, but your impotency or your lack of status or building things up, if you're from the wrong side of tracks, oh geez, how do I fit in to get the right job? Like, there's so many ways you can play this, but the moon is there. It's bringing all kinds of experiences and sensitive to how you're projecting out and who's listening and who's not. And how am I going to live in life? So it's hard to know where you're going to live. And often you end up being dedicated or in a situation where you might be living with someone and you're the stepmom or stepdad helping the other person's kid. So like, you often can be isolated in situations and trying to transform them, make them a little bit better by what you do, but it may not be getting recognized by those in position. Still, you're there and projected. So this is more of a mystical, spiritual understanding. You have to try to understand how come you're thinking that I got to do this. How come it's not working, or how come it is working? So this puzzle of what's right and what's wrong, the consciousness comes into the moon. So one can easily blame oneself for anything with the moon in the 12th house. There's difficult things that come up around the feelings, but there's a need to refine it so it's more spiritual. You may not get the home, you may not get the kid. You could, but if you didn't, then how else are you going to live? For what are you going to be dedicated? Where are you going to get your security? There's the moon in the 12th house. When you put the moon in the 9th house, it's about philosophy and understanding.